Hi, everyone, and welcome to our final Facebook Live of our English for the Workplace course. We've come to the end of this 4-week course, which is sad for all of us, and I hope sad for you as well. But hopefully we can finish on a very positive note with this last Facebook Live. David and Sally are here to answer all your questions, as usual. Hi, both.
Hello, Neil. Hello, everyone.
And David,
Hello.
It's the last week of the course, so let's just talk about what we've been talking about this week, and just how things have gone.
Okay, so this week we've been looking at Greg has been trying to organize team building, for example, and we've had a look at language related to how to discuss, how to agree, how to disagree, and also what to do when things go wrong. And I think it's been quite interesting for people looking at how to deal with a situation like that, and also ultimately how to praise people when finally everything goes right at the end. Which reminds me of our work here on this Facebook Live. It's all going to go right.
Well, that's the difference between us, I guess, because I was going to say, when things go wrong, you mean like in our Facebook Live sessions? But yes, hopefully today everything will be absolutely fine. Okay, so as usual, we have some questions that you've asked during the week that we'll take a look at, and then we'd like you to ask any questions that you have just by posting them in the comments under this video, and we'll try to answer as many as we can over the next half hour or so. So let's go straight in with our first question. Our first question comes from Diego de Castro Vieira, and Diego's saying, when we start a new job, it's normal to feel a little lost because we receive a lot of new information, processes, rules, systems, and everything. Therefore, we need a period of adaptation to understand the company. What's the best way to integrate, I guess, into the company and still be productive in this period when you're taking in so much information, but you still want perhaps to show that you can produce and do good things for the company as well? I think that's Diego's question, which is a great first question to begin with because it covers lots of the things we've been talking about. So of course I'm going to go to David first for this.
Okay. Well, yes, as he says, I think that's a very common problem, that when you join a company that you're worried and not sure what you should be doing, etc. And I think one of the things you need to do, perhaps hopefully as part of an induction, is to set some very clear goals, what you're going to be working on, and what you can be doing. If you have a very particular task, for example, that doesn't require too much help from other people, that it gives you something to do to prove that you really know how to work in the company. But I think while you're doing that, it's also observing other people, taking the chance to speak to them when it is appropriate. And observation is a very important thing, I think, when you start a job, to see how do people talk to each other, how do they integrate, do people tend to work quite quietly, but maybe they chat in break times and canteens, etc. And I think it's something, there isn't a set rule because it will depend on company to company. And I think being aware of how it works in that company is the key.
Yeah.
Sally, how about you? I mean, we've all been there. You start a new job. First of all, you're happy to have got the job and everything, but you've got so much to learn, and at the same time, you want to kind of make the best impression and stuff, and obviously, as David said there, make friends. Get to know people.
Yeah.
What's been your experience with this? Anything?
Well,
that you could...
I thought that was a really interesting point about setting yourself goals. That was really good, and I thought, as well as setting goals, then you should maybe ask for some feedback on those goals as well. So, but maybe some informal feedback from your colleagues, and then you could possibly ask for some more formal feedback from a manager or from your line manager. And I think that when you start a new job, you're usually quite enthusiastic and you want to do everything right and you want to do everything. But I think you have to be a bit patient as well and take it step by step. And also a good idea, I think, is to make notes of things that you've learned, so that you remember everything, because there's so much to learn. So either have a little notebook or keep an online journal or something like that. That would be my advice.
Okay. We've got an interesting selection of of countries watching us at the moment. We have Brazil, Iraq, Nepal, Laos. That's the first one I remember from Laos. And Bolivia so far, so that's great. And hopefully we'll get questions from all these countries before we finish. Let's move on to the next question that we have, which is from Israel Grutner. And this is a good question as well. How can I look friendly on my first few days in the job? It's a little different from Diego's question, which was more about making a good impression about work and so on. And this is really about how to appear friendly, how to make people approach you, and how to show that you're open for friendships and everything else with that. Sally, would you like to start with this one?
No, I think that's a really good question, and it does relate to a lot to the previous question. But I guess it's more about your relationships with your colleagues, perhaps, rather than with managers or more senior staff. And I think when you start a new job, you might be really nervous, in fact, and you might forget to be friendly. I mean, okay, the basic thing you can do is smile at people, introduce yourself, and if you have to do this in English, maybe you want to just practice that a little bit before you go to work on the first day. Also, but remember, as well as being friendly, smiling, introducing yourself, you've got to actually do some work as well. So not to spend too much time being friendly, but make sure you have the balance, and also again to be patient.
I can forget to be friendly for months on end. That's okay. But David, how about you? David, how do you kind of make, when you're in a new work environment or something like that? What do you do? I mean, do you have any tips? I mean, how do you kind of start speaking to new people and so on? When new colleagues come along?
I think the first thing is what Sally said, which is greeting people, saying hello, introducing yourself. I think trying to know people's names is very useful. I think if you know people's names, you immediately come across very positively, because the name is a very personal thing. And we've all worked as teachers, and it's with students. If you remember their name on the second lesson, they're very impressed, and immediately they're on your side.
How do you do that, David? How do you remember people's names? Have you got any tips for that?
I have different things. I think it's easier if you're a teacher, because you've got to register with a list of names to choose from.
Yes.
So you've got a starting point. Sometimes you have a class where 10 of the students are girls and 2 are boys, so you can remember the boys very quickly because they stand out. But I think it is actually something you have to work on. And in myself, I kind of test myself. I look at someone and I go and I try to remember the name, and then I check the list. Okay, yes, there's someone with that name on the list. It's not something. Some people, I think, just magically somehow remember things. But I think if you don't, you have to try different techniques and really practice it. And it's just like learning anything.
I think that's true, because I'm not very good with names myself. It's like you say, you do sometimes have to work it, and I do. As a teacher, when I do it, I do little doodles, little pictures to remind me of who's who with that, and work from the names, because and then it comes after a while, but it takes time. And honestly, sometimes there are colleagues that I work with, that I only see occasionally. I cannot remember their names.
Don't worry, they don't remember yours either, Neil.
They always do. That's the worst.
You don't smile at them.
Force yourself to use the names when you're learning them, and then apologize and just be honest and say, "I'm sorry, I don't remember your name," and make them tell you again.
After you've been working.
That avoids the situation you're describing, Neil.
Okay, let's change to a completely different question now, but a very interesting one that I know from comments that we've had and from many of the people that we deal with here on Facebook, people are interested in. It's from Nawal Ahmed, and Nawal's asking about when you're applying for international organizations, like big agencies like the UN and so on, and NGOs and various organizations. But Niall's asking specifically about the UN. He's saying, what sort of questions are usually asked in international organizations such as UN agencies, and how can I pass through the application and interview? So this is an interesting question, David.
Yes, I did a little research on this because I wasn't sure what the United Nations did. And from my research, I found actually a useful page. We could probably share the link when we're finished. But basically, their approach is competency-based interviews, which are sometimes also called behavioral interviews, which is terminology that not everyone might know what that means. But basically, it's looking at things more like skills, shall we say, or talents that you might have connected to a job, rather than specifically talking about your qualifications and experience directly. So you might get questions, well, obviously it will depend on the size of the job, but for example, about team working, which is a theme we've had on the course, or it could be about leadership, about flexibility. And then the questions you'll be asked will be asking you to explain a situation perhaps where you've had to use that skill. And I think I'm trying to give an example. So for example, team building, you might be asked to describe a situation where you helped curate a successful team, or wherein you were the leader of a team. And I think lots of organizations use this, not just United Nations. British Council is a very good example where our interviews are largely based on competencies. And I think the main advantage is actually very useful for people who don't have a lot of experience in workplaces, because you can probably demonstrate these skills through other experiences that you have had. And I think this is also why workplaces like it, because it means they don't have to always focus exclusively on who has the best qualifications, but also who has the actual skills needed to do the job.
And for preparing for that, that goes back to something we spoke about earlier in the course about like the STAR approach and things like that as well, doesn't it? For kind of
yes.
Thinking about
that. I think. Sorry,
Sally?
I was just going to say about the with this kind of job, if we like for a big organisation like this, for example, the United Nations or the British Council, they might ask you these competency-based questions, and one thing that you might be asked is about how you deal with cultural diversity, and so dealing with different situations that might not be normal for you, so or dealing with people from different cultures, and that's you might be asked to describe a situation where you've been in that situation and something that happened and how you gained a positive outcome. So it's might be worth thinking about that kind of thing as well.
Okay, so we have some questions coming in now, and we seem to have quite a large group from Latin America today. We have, I mentioned already, Bolivia. We have Mexico, Brazil, Argentina as well. So that's great. Let's begin with a question. Unfortunately, I don't know where this person comes from. Oh, Peru as well there, sorry. But this is a question from Rejal Karim. And it's again talking about, your first days in the job, and Rajul's saying something like, sometimes maybe when you're networking as well, after you've talked about your name and your job and what you do, then you run out of things to say and you can't think what to talk about. How can you get out of that awkward situation and continue a conversation? Sally.
So I presume this is when you're talking to your colleagues, isn't it?
Yes, when you first meet someone and you basically said, I'm Neil, and I'm working in whatever.
So then well, then I think you need to ask your colleagues some questions and get them to do talking, because once you've asked them some questions, then the conversation will just generate. So if you're not the sort of person who instantly thinks of questions, maybe think of things to ask beforehand. I mean, you can have very neutral topics like talk about work, or maybe you want to talk about family, other people's families. But maybe think about topics that you want to think about, but definitely ask questions, I would say. And
yeah, David, this is one of your favorite topics, I think, no? Because again, as well, along with being terrible at remembering names, I'm very bad at small talk. So give me
Yes.
advice.
I think you're asking me this one because I told you I get hello to 50 people a day on average.
Yes.
Because of where I happen to sit in our office. I think another one related to work could be like, what projects are you working on?
Mm-hmm.
And you can ask some very practical things to people, even if you already know the answer. It at least gives you a chance to, make conversation, as you said, and it might lead somewhere more interesting. So projects would be one, about where you can find certain materials that you might need in the job, or maybe they can show you where to find something on the computer that you need. I don't think at the beginning of work, it doesn't always have to be very exciting questions. It's just breaking the ice, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's move on because we have lots of questions coming in. And as I say, people from all over, from Myanmar, from India, from Armenia. We're covering a wide spread of countries today, so we'll try and fit as many as we can. And this is a question from...
Sorry, Neil, can I just add one thing to the last one? It just came into my head before we move on. It might also be interesting to ask people about what they do. Are there any social events connected to work and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That would be a way of getting to know people, and also you get an idea of what the culture is. Do people go out, for a coffee after work, or do they all go straight home? Or so I think that's another good one I just thought of.
Okay, I think that's great advice. So this is a completely different question, not work related now, from Ong Kant. And Ong Kant is saying, I have a lot of problems with, I have a lot of S sound when I speak English. How can I avoid this? So I guess there's sibilant, their S is quite prominent, a S sound perhaps. Maybe they're having problems with other sounds that are coming out as S. It's not entirely clear. So maybe just some pronunciation advice and in general on how to work on that. Who would like to take that one?
I think for...
Okay,
go on,
ahead.
I was going to give some very, very general advice about pronunciation, just to recommend a website, the Learn English Teens Speaking Skills Activities to practice with those. It's basically you have a situation and you listen and repeat and listen and speak, and it's just very good to practice speaking. You don't feel any pressure because you're not actually speaking to a person, so it's quite good pronunciation, and that's we can put a link to that.
Yeah, and if you use like the audio recorder on your computer, you can actually record yourself while you're doing that. I've tried that because they have the gaps, so you can use the sound recorder on your computer, play it, and then when you speak in the gaps, and then listen back, and it really works well. It's really good.
Great, yeah.
Anything else, David?
Well, I mean, I think if it's a specific sound, or sorry, if it's a specific sound, I think we have some links we can give that shows, where your tongue should be in your mouth, etc., to produce those sounds, which might be helpful if it's very precise problem.
Okay.
But also, just to add to that one thing is that remember that if it's not affecting communication, it's not a problem. You don't have to have like a perfect British accent or anything. Yeah.
Okay. Lots of questions coming in. Basima Alansari, any advice for someone who is looking for a job at home? Are there such jobs? So someone who's looking for, who wants to work from home. Any advice for that, or the type of jobs they could consider and could think of?
Wow.
Well, working online would be one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're good examples of people who are working from home, but
yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Bless you. Bless you.
I'm sure the camera will have gone to me just then. Okay. But yeah,
that was Neil sneezing.
Actually, this is one I don't think we can answer just now, but we will have a look at it. I'll do a little bit of research after this and see if because I'm sure there are some good pieces of advice for this, and possibly some websites that just focus on this type of job, or maybe specific type of job you can look at in employment websites. So we'll look into that one, and then
maybe it's one also worth checking with your employer, because some employers allow you to work from home, or at least not having to come to the office every day. So I think it's one, if you already have a job, it's worth asking about.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer without knowing what kind of area, really. I mean, we all work from home, but we all work in the field of education. And I guess we're all connected to we all work for the British Council, and we work in offices as well. But I would say, I'm sure we could find something and add some links. Neil, you're good at that, aren't you?
I'm sure there are some it's becoming more and more common. So I'm sure there are types of work that people can start to consider and look at and maybe work towards. Okay, I have a question. Unfortunately, the name is in the Cyrillic alphabet and I can't read it, but I will learn this in future because we're getting to it. But the question is, hello, I have a lot of foreign friends. I chat with them, but it's hard to speak with them face to face because I don't understand them and they speak too fast. What should I do? A very common problem. So we're talking about a person who does have the chance to practice English and does have a chance to speak to people and develop their skills, but is finding it difficult. Sally?
Well, I think there's...
Okay.
David?
Okay.
I was too quick. Just Sally looked like she was going to answer.
If you understand the conversation, that's a very positive thing. And the written conversation, I presume they're talking by chat, is what?
No, they're saying face to face, but people speak too fast for them.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah. Okay. Well, the obvious first starting point is to ask them to speak a bit slower, isn't it?
Yeah.
We can, maybe that is the first problem, that some people naturally speak very fast and they are difficult to understand. I think you should consider that maybe they have, but it's also something to be patient with over time. The more you chat to people, the more you're going to understand them.
Yeah.
Certain people have very complicated and difficult accents, and it may not be necessarily your fault. It may just be it's something you're not used to. And like most things in life, practice gets you there.
Yeah. And it sounds like if they're having like a natural conversation and speaking at their natural speed with you, they obviously think that your English is really good. So, but I do understand this situation, and I find myself in this situation quite a lot, where I think I'm in a group and they're talking Spanish or Catalan, and I think of the thing that I want to say, and the conversation's already moved on because I can't keep up with it, and unless I control the conversation. So that's one thing that you can do. If you start a new topic of conversation, then you know what's being talked about. But yeah, basically practice, which is the thing we always say, isn't it? But
and I think, as David said, there's a lot. I think a lot of people are embarrassed or shy to kind of ask people to slow down or repeat something. And that could, especially in a work situation, that can actually lead to real problems, because if you just if the other person thinks you've understood everything they've said and you've gone, and then you go away and you only understood 70%, and it could be something that's very important for your work. And so it's much better to kind of say, sorry, could you repeat that? Or sorry, could you slow down? Than it is to misunderstand and get a wrong impression.
Another thing, if it's work, Neil, is you could ask people to put the key points into an email when you're finished, just so you have reference points. That might be a slightly less embarrassing way around it if you're worried about that.
Yeah,
that's also true. It's always a good idea to get things in writing if it's something important, for sure. Okay. Moving on, lots and lots of questions. Okay, a few questions about general English learning at the moment. Saroj Nepal is asking, how can I test my English level at home? Well, we actually have some tests on our website where you can test your levels, which gives you a general idea because it only tests your reading and grammar and vocabulary. Of course, it doesn't test your speaking or writing or listening. But that's one way to get a general idea. The other way is, Sally mentioned earlier about some of the skills activities on the Learn English Teens website. These activities are at 5 different levels, from A1 to C1, from beginner to advanced. And a good way to really test your level is to start in the middle with B1, see how you get on. If it's very difficult, move down to A2, try some activities there. If it's too easy, move up. And that way, you know, because it may be different. For example, your reading skills may be better than your writing skills or your listening skills. So really, I think we have a lot of activities, like many, 50, 60 activities, all at different levels within that. So we'll put a link for that under here, and you can try that. And I think we have another member joining us. Okay.
I think that was an agreement.
I wasn't sure if it was agreement or they didn't like that answer, but okay.
Sorry, yeah, that was my dog saying yes. Excellent advice. Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's a piece of advice that we have shared with us from Manuel Mena in Mexico, going back to our earlier conversation about making friends and getting to know people. And Manuel's saying, I know for a fact that you can also use a nickname, which is easier for people from other countries to refer to you. So Manuel's perhaps talking about if you have many people of different nationalities and different names, and it's difficult to manage that, saying use a nickname. Sometimes people from other parts of the world have hard names to pronounce, so you can shorten their name or use a nickname. So that's a suggestion from Manuel there. Okay, let's move on. Sorry, just for a moment. Again, a more general question here from Navid Ahmad Kogiani from Afghanistan. And Navid is saying, I've been learning English for a long time, but I don't seem able to improve my conversational skills or communication skills. So a common problem. Navid feels it's been a long time, but not making the progress that he would like to make. Who would like to give Navid some advice on how to?
I'll say something. Well, because the dog's quiet at the moment. I think this is a really, really, really common thing, and what it means is that you actually know quite a lot of English already. Because when you're a beginner, you know nothing, and then you go up and up and up and learn a lot of English, and you can feel yourself learning. But when you're at this kind of intermediate level, it's difficult to feel that you're progressing because you already have a lot of English. So I think you have to kind of force yourself to do things that are difficult, things that feel difficult, to try and push yourself to a different level. And I think, again, going back to the skills activities that we mentioned before, if you're doing something like this, you can try and go to a higher level and see if you can feel some kind of improvement that way. But yeah, have you got any specific advice for that, David?
Well, I think what you said is true, that when you're a beginner, it's very easy to notice that you have improved because you learn 5 words and your vocabulary has improved 500%. If you already know 2,000 words and you learn 5, you feel like nothing happened. But actually, you made the same progress. It's just it takes longer when you know quite a lot to get to the next level of knowing, even more, being advanced. And for most people, this is actually quite a long process. If you look at advice from, lots of different organizations, whether, the Council of Europe framework, which would suggest 1 to 2 years of studying to move up levels. So I think the advice you gave is very good there. So you need to force yourself to keep going, keep working every day, and perhaps to go back to what you've done before, because maybe then you realize, well, actually, 2 months ago when I did this exercise, it was very difficult, but actually now I can do it quite easily. And it's not because I just have to remember the answers. It's actually a sign that your English has improved. So I think looking backwards and reflecting and seeing changes can make you feel more positive about the situation.
Okay, just a slight change of topic again. I think all of our favorite things about these courses is the way that people help each other and share advice and comment on each other's comments and contribute ideas. And we have a perfect example today. Earlier, you remember Basima asked the question about working from home, and Aeneas Marco has shared already a website, which is a website especially for freelance jobs from home, where you can search for these in different places. So that's great. So thank you, Aeneas. Okay, let's move on. I'm just quickly scrolling through here. Okay, from Hem Mohammed. My hobby is English. I'm an English teacher from Iraq. I love BBC and CNN channels. That's just a hello there from a teacher there.
Fine.
Okay, this name I can't read, unfortunately, but it's a good question. It's how can I improve my intonation and chunking? Intonation is one of those things that I think people very often don't pay enough attention to. And it makes such a big difference to how your English comes across and how natural it sounds and everything else with that. So it is a good question. Do we have any tips for how to improve intonation? Sally, you're nodding, so I'm going to go to you first.
I'm kind of nodding, thinking, yeah, that's a really good question. And and it's the sort of thing that I practice with my students in class by getting them to listen and repeat. And by playing them short sentences or short extracts, and then they write it down. Mm-hmm. So you could try doing something like that. I mean, that's really for listening, but then you can say it. You can repeat the extracts and say it yourself to improve your pronunciation and your intonation in that way. I'm trying to think what specifically we've got on the websites that we could link to, or something that we could link to practice. My dog's barking.
There's some very good intonation there from the dog.
See, I can tell so much from the intonation there. You know, I can just I don't need words. I know I can feel. But intonation is very, very important. I mean, I personally find it's more of a barrier to understanding an English learner speaking than their pronunciation very often, because it really can confuse you. I do have a couple of links I can share for this that I will put in. But David, do you have any tips on this as well?
Well, I think just following up from what Sally said is also what I think you mentioned before, is recording yourself. Because if you're not in the classroom like she described, if you take extracts of people speaking and then record yourself saying it, so you can compare, does my voice sound very flat compared to what the example is, or am I actually, too musical, going too up and down? Some languages do that a lot. And I think that way you can actually teach yourself, or at least become aware of what your problem is, and then start practicing. I mean, even the videos and some of the audio excerpts we have on our course would be a good place to start with that kind of practice.
And it is, exactly.
And compare it to what you heard.
Maybe watch it. If you've got a favourite soap opera that you watch in English, that would be something like that. If you got a short YouTube video, an extract from there, that would be a good thing to practice repeating, because it's short bits of dialogue, so real communication.
Okay, so we'll share some links for that. We've come to the end of our time, but I just have a few short questions I'm just going to talk about very quickly here just before we finish. I have a question from from Dalia Abdul Monam, who's saying, if somebody's level is intermediate, can they go through IELTS? And I just need to say for that, it depends what you need IELTS for. Different things. I mean, usually for university, for example, they're asking for a band of 6.5 or 7, which is advanced level. So you would need to go through a preparation period before you would take IELTS for that. But for other things, for example, for visas, for working visas for some countries, they're asking for 5, which is intermediate level. So really, you need to check what you need the IELTS for. and then work out how much time you need to prepare for that. And we're having, when's our next Understanding IELTS course, Sally?
It starts on the 2nd of October.
So we have a course starting on 2nd of October, which can help you with this, and that you'll also be able to test your level and kind of see how you do with that, and that might help you with that. We have a lot of questions, including from Aeneas, Marco, and everybody else, which are general questions about how can I improve my English, how can I improve my listening skills. As we've said already, we have a lot of good resources on the website for that, so we'll share links to those on the step, on the course, and under this video. And I think that's it. I think that's it. I think we can stop there. So, end of the course, and any final words, David?
Well, I think thank you to all the participants. I think it's been a very interesting course. You've been giving us some very nice and positive feedback at the end of the course this week when we've asked you for your feedback and your suggestions. One or two interesting suggestions as well. So, so I hope it's been useful for you, and maybe see you on another course in the future.
Okay. Sally, last words?
Yeah. Just thank you to everyone who's taken part. It's been really interesting, and I've actually learnt from you as well, because for example, I learned this week what a tree, what was it called, a phone tree test, which I've never heard of before, which is something that happens in Japan if there's an earthquake, where people phone each other to check that everyone's all right. I'd never heard of that before, so thank you for all those things that I've learned like that, and just good luck with your job searches and with your English. And we've got another course starting in, another English for Work course starting in November. Okay. So you can join us there if you want to.
So we have IELTS in October, English for Workplace in November. We're off for the summer now.
And then, well, we've got, I know there are some teachers, some English teachers on the course as well, and they might be interested in the Teaching for Success course, which starts September the 11th.
Okay.
So yeah, apart from that, we're off.
Okay, great. And that's it. And from me as well, I'd just like to say thank you for all your great questions, and we'll add some extra resources under the comments here. If you have any other questions that we haven't answered, you can ask them on the course, on the step, or you can ask them here on Facebook. And of course, we also have a last goodbye from our other member. Okay, right. So bye for now.